Okay, let's begin. Everybody, welcome, 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 welcome. I am delighted to have you here today. Some of you know me. I'm Anna Bruni Samhani. For those of you who don't, I am a converted civil engineer, now entrepreneur, working passionately with nonprofits and philanthropists to get us all to work better together and achieve greater impact. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first things first, I want to acknowledge you for taking the time out of your Saturday to spend time with me today. I'm grateful. I will use your time as wisely as I'm able to. There's a lot of information, experiences that I want to share with you. I'll do my best to keep it to 40, 45 minutes, and then I'll hang around a little bit later for anybody who wants to ask any questions, have a bit of a conversation around things. So as we start, I know some of you answered it before in the questionnaire, but I'm just launching a quick poll as everybody comes in. If you could just let me know if you mostly receive funding, if you mostly give funding, or if you do a bit of both. I always love to know who we have on the call. And the way I come at it and the way we'll be approaching the conversation is it's not about pointing fingers. There's a lot of challenges in the sector, and I'm not here to say, this side of the equation is doing this wrong, this side of the equation is doing things right. No, it's about observation and group learning and trying to get at it together. Because my goal is to get nonprofits, philanthropists, charities, action makers on the ground to be aligned and work together. And I know we can do that. So I'll share a little bit about my experience, but I'll also be asking questions. So for you to get the most out of your time today, I want to invite you to participate. If there's a thought that comes through, please add it in the chat. It'll benefit somebody who's in the conversation as well. Maybe it'll stimulate a thought. And if I ask you a question, then please participate, write it down. Whether you're listening to this live or whether you're listening to the replay, still, the more you participate, the more you're going to get out of the session. So that's it for housekeeping, I suppose. So let's get started then. Why did you show up today? I can see from the chat that everybody on the call actually is a receiver of funding. So that's great. We'll cover both sides of the equation, but my experience and my work over the past few years has mainly been listening and observing and working closely with nonprofits. Funders, if you're on the call, if you join later on, we want to hear your side of the equation too, and I'll be covering that as well. But why did you show up today? Take a second and think about this. It's a Saturday morning. Why did you take the time to show up and to come to this conversation today? I want to suggest that there's something that's not working in the sector, and that's why we're here. And my hypothesis for today that I want to explain and expand and demonstrate to you, pitch to you, is that all of us, every one of us individually, is at cause and in part responsible for the difficulties and the challenges that we face in creating impact. Whether it's how much money we get, I think we are in part responsible. Like, what if the amount of money that we get is a reflection of how much money we think we deserve in some cases? And what if the amount of impact that we create is a reflection of how well we understand the mechanics of impact? That's where we're going today, so I hope you're ready. And keep introducing yourselves. And Prablit says both. Rubina says, we want to know whether we are co-creators or catalysts. Yes, great. That's exactly what we'll be covering. And I want you guys to think about it. So I'll share my thoughts, but I want you to put your thinking caps on and think about that as well. So I believe that the impact that we get and the world we create and the work that we do is a reflection of our own actions. And so I want to invite you, as of today, to take responsibility for that. So we'll be covering quickly how we set out about our intent, what do we want to attract as a sector. Then we'll be looking at how does this manifest in our actions and what patterns, roles, and responsibilities have we sort of gotten ourselves attached to. How could things be different? And then at the end, I'll give you an invitation to join in some of my work. So let's think about these patterns. Now, what do you want to attract in the sector? Or type it down in the chat if something comes up to your mind. I mean, For me, a few years ago, I was working, I just started off as an entrepreneur, switching from engineering to consulting for nonprofits. And I was brainstorming my goals. And at some point I thought, you know what, I hit a difficult patch. I was starting off, as I'm sure many of you started off at some point. Can you relate? And I didn't have many clients, and I reached a point where I didn't have money to buy a present for my husband for his anniversary, or for any holidays or any trips, or some of the things that matter to me. And I felt, okay, actually, that's not good enough. So I set my goals on finances. I said, okay, I need to take a little break. I need to get more money into my business. And so I took action based on that intent of I need money. I defined my intent as more money. I took action. I got a job as a consultant in engineering, and I got a lot more money. But what happened later was interesting. I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And I left the job and I went back to my work at the Confluencers, which I hadn't left. I just put it on the back burner a little bit. The reason I'm sharing this with you is, in many cases, I think we don't frame our goals deeply enough. We stay quite superficial. We maybe do them a bit too quickly. And the problem is, if we set our goals of why are you here? What do you want out of your organization? As the first thing that comes to mind, sometimes it leads us astray. So if we don't set our goals based on deep self-reflection and honesty with ourselves about what we want as individuals first, as well as organizations, that creates a misalignment, because we end up down a path where somewhere down the line we realize, actually, we didn't want to be down that path. So please type in the chat, why are you in the sector? I really want to know, what attracted you to work in the nonprofit social sector? Hello, Lester. Welcome, Lester. Welcome, Sabrina. Welcome, Suresh. If you haven't introduced yourselves, go ahead and introduce yourselves. And as I said at the start, participate. So I want to hear from you. What attracted you to the sector? Think about it. And what do you want? What do you want to attract at the moment in your work? Sense of duty. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. What else? Being part of the role I'm playing in the organization. Yeah, being part of a bigger mission. If you're having that sense of meaning. What else? What attracted me to the sector was I wanted purpose. I wanted to find meaning. I wanted to find fulfillment. I wanted to be a part of something bigger. Rubina says, I work at scale. Yes, exactly. A lot of us working in the sector want to find meaning and want to find purpose. And when it comes to even the practical things, what is it that we want to attract? What is it that your organization needs at the moment? Is it money? Is it funding? Rubina saying, sector completes me, gives me the pleasure to help some people. Listening to the untold and untouched stories. Wonderful. I love that too, Sabrina. I love listening to your stories and to everybody's stories. Passion for the injustice. Suresh says, it was a need when I entered, but it evolved as a life, a way of life. Absolutely. Wanting any money in exchange. That's what your organization needs. So what's emerging is we want purpose. We're in the sector because we want purpose. But then we also have all these practical needs that we need, right? Like, we want to attract funding. We need to cover our costs. All those things that reality kicks in. We need time extensions. We need time to think. We need better operational standards. So how do we merge these two, and how do we make sure that they're aligned? And what I want to invite you to do is always ask yourself, when you're setting a goal, when you're driving a plan or something for the year, now it's March, so it's a good time, if you haven't done so already, to plan for the year. What human need is hiding behind your goal? And are you giving yourself the space to actually own and embrace and experience and fulfill that need? So if your need is to be connected, for example, and to listen to the stories of the people that you're helping? Is your day-to-day life and is the way you structure work, is it conducive? Does it help you fulfill that need? And if you're a funder, for example, and a funder sets out with a desire to create impact, are you as a funder giving yourself space to actually say part of what I'm doing is selfish? Part of the philanthropy I'm doing is because I need meaning. I need to feel a part of it. There's nothing to be ashamed in terms of human need. The problem arises when we don't recognize it. There's nothing more dangerous than an unmet human need, because then we get confused of why we're doing things. So let's all be clear that we're here for our own individual fulfillment as humans and to serve others, but we're here to do both. And the two are different. So those are the things that we want to attract. We want to attract these connections. Pradeep says we want to learn to link and leverage resources towards sustainable communities and build better forward on social and ecological capital. Yeah, so leverage the resources that we've got. We want to do good work. We want to attract money. We want to attract better relationships, better standards. We want to embrace this way of life, which is about giving and participating. So that's what we want. But what are we attracting? My guess is the reason we're here is because we're attracting a lot of things that we don't want. And some of the things I see in the sector is insufficient funding, not going to where it's needed. Anybody experience that? I have. Funding structures or ways of evaluating what should or shouldn't be funded that don't match the needs on the ground or the problem on the ground. Lack of flexibility. When something goes wrong, how easy is it to change it? Lots of rules and regulations, not enough collaboration. There's a bit of adversity. Who's guilty of not wanting to share everything about their organization's work? I've been in that situation where you're not quite sure what to share because you're afraid that you're going to be told off or that your funding is going to be taken away from you. All this stuff is happening, and it's stuff that we don't want. It's not what we set out in the sector to achieve. Am I right? So I've identified two patterns of behavior that are getting in our way. And the good thing is they're patterns that we can change. So again, I'm not going over them to point fingers. I'm going over them so we can understand them, accept them, observe where they're happening in our own lives, and do something to change them. So the first one is the catalyst savior. So it's interesting. I don't think anybody in the chat today said, I want to help people. But we did say we want to find meaning, and we want to hear stories, and we want to be a part of other people's life. Now, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. I joined the sector because I wanted to be of help. I wanted to be surrounded by people that I felt had a vision aligned with me. I felt that my corporate life was not fulfilling me. And I felt like I need to give more. I need to find a way for my human being, for my skills, for my ideas to be useful to somebody. Surely somebody needs them. So I started from a place of I want to help. As I evolved in my journey, I realized that my journey was more about learning as well as contributing, and that I alone couldn't be the only person to help. But unfortunately, whether you're receiving grants and you're working with a community or with a specific end user group, you might come from that end user group. You might actually have experienced firsthand the problem that you're trying to solve, or you might be a little bit removed from it. Either way, whether you're a funder or a nonprofit, it is easy for us, and I have seen it happen time and time again, for us to identify with the savior. Who's courageous enough to put their hand up and admit that that has happened in the past? We see ourselves as saviors sometimes. There's no shame in it, but it does happen. I'm going to put my hand up. Am I the only one? I'll tell you, a few years ago, I was working for a nonprofit. I was doing grant development work for them. And we developed a program, and for the grant, we needed the endorsement of a bigger funder body. So we submitted the application, and we submitted our proposal to the endorsement organization. I'm not going to name names here. And the organization really, really liked it. They weren't expecting. I got the impression they weren't expecting to like it, but they really liked it. And so they called us up, and they said, we really want to endorse it. We absolutely love the project. It's amazing. But you have to change all these things, and it has to go through all these departments' approvals in order for us to endorse it. And I said, wait a second. Okay, you want changes to be made to the party. On the one hand, you're saying you really want to endorse it. You want us to go ahead. You want to give us your stamp of approval. On the other hand, you're saying you have to make all these changes. Why? And I asked the question, why? And they said, oh, because, we have all these department procedures. We have to go through this department first, and then this department has to see it, and then the legal department has to see it. And this was a grant-giving body that had to approve our grant proposal as a nonprofit. And at some point I looked at them and I said, well, I'm happy for us to do the changes to the impact if it benefits the project and the people we're trying to serve. But I'm a consultant and I don't feel comfortable advising my client to spend more money on my time just because of a bureaucratic whim. So let's prioritize the work that you think is needed because the project needs to be improved versus the work that is needed because it just needs to be tick some boxes in some organization. And you know what they responded? They said, oh, well, if you don't do that, the project won't happen. I couldn't believe it. But that type of condescendence happens, and it happens a lot. And it's better for us to look at it in the face. This idea that a project or a change or a transformation will not happen without us as the saviors coming in. I hate to break it to us, but it's an illusion. All of us at the end of the day are indispensable. And the only person we can really save is ourselves. So Lester says, yes, this is something that we face. So we need to, what can we learn from this? It's okay to want to be a savior. It's okay to want to celebrate the work that we do. I'm not saying let's not celebrate. I'm saying let's give ourselves to celebrate and our little part in the piece of the puzzle. But let's not extend it to the point where we think we are the puzzle. We're not the puzzle. And so what can we learn from this? We can learn the importance of how do we separating our own human needs from the needs of the programs and the people that we serve. We're linked, we're complementary, we're part of the same ecosystem, but we are not one. Because what happens quickly, and you might have experienced this yourself, is that this sends off a vicious trigger cycle. We start off as we want to join the sector to find purpose, whether you're a philanthropist or a nonprofit. Then you have a decision. What level of awareness do I want to have of my work and my role? If you dig deep, you accept that part of it is for yourself, and you can make informed decisions about it. If you don't, you start thinking, oh, I depend on this need to feel needed, this need to feel good. And my role is to feel needed and to feel good. And so then we attach success and we define success as external validation. And that is very dangerous, because then when it comes to making decisions, which we all make in our work, whatever role we have, every day we need to weigh out, right? All these different stakeholders, all these different decisions. And when it comes to making a decision and saying, oh, do I do this thing that is going to make me look good and is going to give me external validation and a pat on the back and this illusion of control over the future? Or do I do this other thing that is actually a bit risky, but the project is telling me that's what it needs? If we've defined success as feeling good about ourselves and patting ourselves on the back, well, we're going to go for the external validation option. And that's what happens time and time again. And that's what you've seen in that example, an organizational structure that has prioritized looking good and created a lot of work for itself by feeling needed and having this big responsibility to allocate funding. I'm not saying allocating money is not a big responsibility, it is. But so is doing the work. So is every part of the puzzle. And so let's not overkill this work of allocating and reviewing and assuring sort of impact control. Because at the end of the day, we cannot control it. We'll come to that later. So this cycle happens, and this cycle is not good, and we want to avoid it. Sabrina's saying organizations' projects become donor-driven, partner-driven, and sometimes no more hours. Exactly. And that brings us to the second point. That's perfect timing, because this is what happens if you're in the catalyst savior mode. Let's look at the other behavior that can happen. Well, the other behavior that can happen is you start from the starting point of there's pressure from above. There's pressure from funding to control, because there's pressure. Other people are being driven by the need to have validation and the need to control risk, right? And when we have this pressure to control, we have a choice. Just like the savior has a choice. Am I going to be aware of my needs or not? And how am I going to act? people experiencing pressure, being bullied or pressurized into fitting a box, into doing something that is not maybe what your end user needs, we always have a choice. We can give into it or we cannot. I'll share a story. A few years ago, many years ago, when I was 7, I used to suffer from really, really heavy migraines. They were debilitating. I don't get them anymore, but I couldn't think. I couldn't go to school. I was very ill. And one day at school, there was a lecture about HIV and HIV awareness. And one of the symptoms that they talked about was migraines. Very informative, nice, pleasant lecture. The next day I go to school and all of a sudden I go to my friends, I go say hi, and they run away from me. I still have this image in my head of these little girls running away from me as if I had a dangerous disease that was contagious. All of a sudden, I lost all my friends. And I was excluded. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt lost. I felt bullied. And the point of this is not to give you a sob story, but I was talking about this with my father, who's a psychoanalyst, just yesterday. And he said something that really made me think. And I wanted to pass that on to you. And he said, when people are being bullied by a group, and I'm not talking like violence, abuse, I'm talking this type of group, light bullying, which can still have an impact. When people are being bullied, why do you think the person being bullied lets themselves be bullied? I said, I don't know, maybe because they think they're superior, I actually said. And he said, well, part of it is because the person being bullied agrees with the bullier. So let's think for a second, how does that translate to this dynamics of power control with funding? If a funder says, you need to fit these boxes, otherwise you're not good enough. You need to tick which impact space you work in, otherwise I'm not going to give you funding. You need to work to my time scales as a funder, because otherwise you're not going to get any funding at all. You need to do this sort of, you don't work, you don't fit, you're not good enough, you don't get any feedback. All these messages are a type of bullying. And I'm not saying all funders are bullying, and I'm not pointing the finger at funders, I'm just observing. This is what I see happen. And as a nonprofit, what can we do? Or as an organization receiving this, what can we do? We have a choice. And unfortunately, the choice I see us choose is this helplessness mask. And let's be clear, I am not saying nonprofits are helpless. I am here because I know you're not. I'm here because I'm mesmerized by the power and the resilience of what every nonprofit leader is able to create. But then why? With this power, with this knowledge that we're all sitting on, with access and trust of the community, why on earth do we sometimes choose to wear this helpless mask? The way many nonprofits show up and make decisions is underpinned and reconfirms this power dynamics that started off with the funders, but it continues and it thrives because as nonprofit leaders, we let it thrive. It's because we're attached to this story of we are dependent on funders, we are helpless. And this can come and go. I'm not saying you're either one or the other, it just manifests. Can you relate to this? Poonam says, the perils of too much ownership are also something to be mindful of. Exactly. Absolutely. And so when you get into the cycle, you receive this pressure and have a choice. And you're like, okay, well, I can either fight and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that project, Mr. Funder, because that's not relevant. It's not what my team needs. So either you fund what my team needs, or I'm sorry, be ready to walk away. But in many cases, we don't. We let fear take over. Oh, what if we don't get any more funding? What if somebody thinks badly of us? What if we're actually not good enough? Maybe we're not ready to do that program. Maybe we do need to do this other program. That program can also be quite good after all. We talk ourselves out of it. And we then start taking decisions where the type of work that we do is not our core mission and our vision gets diluted. And what happens next is we lose momentum. We lose clarity of vision, and that costs a price because then over time, we're attracting more and more of the work that we don't want to do. Our confidence goes even more down. And then what happens? Well, then we get less and less funding. Because as our confidence goes down, well, it's going to be very hard once we're doing 20 different things. If a funder asks us, oh, what's the one thing that you're really good at? So we don't have to think twice because we're like, oh, well, it was this, but now for 5 years, I've been doing all these other things because that's what the funders wanted me to do. So not quite sure yet, right? We are better than that. We can do differently from that, and you deserve better than that. And that's why we're looking at this cycle. And the long-term effects are that you lose staff because you don't have money to keep staff going, right? That staff means losing knowledge, precious knowledge, the continuity of teams, the space, the fact that you don't get funding to pay your bills, to pay decent salaries, to think, to learn, to make mistakes. That all has a knockdown effect on the confidence, and it just fuels this cycle. We go round and round again, with half of the cycle being a savior mode. Oh, you need me, let's control. And the other half of the cycle saying, okay, we're helpless. It doesn't serve either side. So let me ask you, what narrative, what story have you got in your head about how things need to play out? And who told you that that's the way things need to go? I was having this conversation just the other day with my coach, and I was being a bit negative. And I said, oh, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. It's going to be all negative. And she looked at me and she said, okay, so you've decided that that is the story that your future is going to be like. Who told you that? And I was like, no, that's not the story I want. So let's switch. And let me share a little bit of how. Suresh says, as long as organization is focused and sticks to its core area, founder-driven or partner-driven projects add value to the organization's effort and provide great learning opportunities. Absolutely, if you structure it right. So it's about this balance, right? An organization needs to know what their core is, what their area is, and be willing to say, I understand why you want to do this other thing. It's not your fault, Mr. Funder or Mr. Provider of funds, that you want to do this thing. I'm not blaming you, but I can explain to you why this is not a good idea. And it's a conversation, it's a dialogue, and both sides learn. So let's take a look at what that looks like and how that can shift. We need to set goals that don't just look at the long-term systemic. We need to set goals at different levels. We can set personal, individual goals that give us a chance to fulfill our needs as working the sector. Whether that's, I need to have space to celebrate with my team and feel proud, even if a project fails, because I've put in the work and I'm learning. I need to have space as a funder to sometimes fund on trust, because it gives me fulfillment to make a human decision sometimes and not a rational one. Whatever that is, we need to set those goals as well as the longer term systemic goals. We need to shift from this dependence on external validation to an internal compass. We need to shift from these rigid stereotypes of this is good, this is bad, this is success, to actually, there's space for failure. We can't control the future. There's so much risk. There's so much uncertainty in these projects. We need to create space for failure. We need to shift from this savior mentality to actually, we're all here to learn. Let's put our humble learner's hat on. We have some ideas, we'll express them, we'll do our best intent, but also we're here to learn. And we need to shift from so-and-so knows best to we all have something to contribute, whether it's funding, whether it's knowledge, whether it's trust of a community, whether it's networks, whatever it is, we are all here to contribute equally. It's not just funding that matters. It's not just knowledge that matters. It's not just networks. Everything needs to come together. We need to shift from short-term to long-term and become patient in our funding and in our programs. Yes, we can target short-term wins, so we build momentum. Absolutely. But let's build some long-term goals in as well. So we give ourselves a chance to actually fight and change those nitty-gritty behavioral changes that are beyond our control in the short term. And we need to make space from saying, oh, capacity building is just a waste. I'm not going to fund that. That's not worth it. No, actually, let's explain what capacity building means, what teamwork means. Let's give it the value that it deserves, because let's face it, without that, you don't have a project. If your team isn't working well together and isn't fulfilled, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, they're going to waste it, right? So capacity building and team learning and organizational growth and good procedures in place and healthy tax accounting processes, those are all things that help and uplift the project. They don't detract from it. Have you seen any other big company function without those departments? No. So how can you expect the nonprofit sector to function without them? You can't. So these are the things that need to shift. And then the other one is risk. It's not fair to have contracts where one side of the bargain carries all the risk of things going wrong, even things beyond their control, and another side carries none. Risks are shared. So there's many things that need to change. And I cover a lot of them in my work and in some of the programs I do. But the one thing I wanted to really leave you with is we need to change how we understand the mechanics of impact being created. There was a story that came up in a workshop with the Aspire Circle group. Some of you are from that. And we talked about a scenario where there was a well being built, and one of the women that was supposed to use the well wasn't using the well because she realized that in order to get to the well, she would have to buy, in order to use the well, she had to buy a Jeffy can, a can of water, and buy more water than she needed in a container that she couldn't carry. And so she wasn't using the well. What do you think of that project? Can we claim, as if you were the owner of that project, would you claim success or not? Type that in the chat. Do you think that's a successful project? I really want to know. The well is built and it's not used. Is that a successful project? Lester says no. Anybody else? The woman could use the well, but she doesn't use it. Come on, don't be shy. No, meets the funders goals only. Rubina. Remember, there's no right or wrong here, just expressing opinions. Flaw in understanding the need. Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I think it's both. Let me talk you through it. If we do everything, if everybody in the project does everything possible with the information they have available to understand and diagnose the need and spend money on it, and they do the work, and the result is not what is expected, can the people in the process that work towards that be to blame for something that is beyond their control? What I'm getting at, there reaches a point where the final act of transformation is actually beyond all of our controls. We can have everything in place, but at the end of the day, it's the decision of that woman. That woman is the woman that actually actualizes the impact. She makes a decision to do something different. She changes her behavior because the settings and the environment and the opportunities that we provided are such that it makes it convenient for her to change the behavior, right? We could have even maybe done the right jerry can and the right size, and she might still not want to use the well because of something else. So what I'm trying to say is our boundary of responsibility, of influence is limited. What does that mean? It means we still need to aim for the woman to use it, but we need to also be flexible and design in the fact that we can't foresee all unexpected needs. No matter how much money we spend, no matter how many resources we have, we should aspire to understand everything, but accept that actually in many cases we won't. And that is not failure as such. That's learning. It's failure if you then walk away from it and say, oh, okay, it's not working. Let's go do something else. Let's go do a pipeline instead. That's failure. But if you take that as a learning opportunity, you go back to the community and you call up imagine a situation that happens and you call up your funder and you're like, okay, funder, we did the program. It worked on time, but you know what? The women's aren't using it. Oh, interesting. I wonder why. Maybe the funder calls some other people and says, oh, are there other projects that are doing water that are facing a similar issue? Oh, no, there aren't. Okay, let's investigate. Let's put our thinking caps on. Who do we trust? Who can we ask? We go to the community. We're nice to them. They trust us. We value their time. We respect their time. We schedule the meetings at a time that works for them because we respect their labor and their work. Maybe we even pay them for their time, for their information. We sit down with them and we ask them, what's going on? Why is this not happening? They confide in us what they actually need. Oh, they need a smaller can. They need a way to carry it. Okay, well, the funder says, oh, I've got an idea. We could use this other technology. And the nonprofit says, yeah, absolutely, that could work. And we could subsidize this. That's co-creation. That's group thinking. Can you see how that's different? So all of a sudden, you've turned a challenge into a normal blossoming project that evolves and learns and isn't fixed. So there's one thing that you take away from today. I'd like it to be this, that we cannot take away the freedom of the ultimate person we're trying to help, their free will to actualize the impact. They actualize the impact. We are the gardeners. We're the people that provide the opportunities. And as such, we can work together. We can try our very hard to listen. We might get it, we might not get it right first time, and that's okay. So wrapping up then, I would like to send you off with the idea that we need to have the mindset of a baby and the wisdom of a gardener. And I'm going to explain that. Mindset of a baby, I'm seeing my son, who's 6 months old, crawl. And he's trying to crawl. And up to a little while ago, he was happy on his tummy. He had no problem sitting on his tummy, looking around, whining at things. He was okay. That was his status quo, was I'm okay on my tummy. All of a sudden, from one day to the next, it shifted. It was like his mindset shifted, up leveled. He was like, no freaking way, I'm gonna be still. I need to be mobile. I am on the roll. And the second he's moving back and forth, bless him, trying to move, and he is just not taking no for an answer. He's throwing himself into the sofa, trying to move. He's rolling over to get to places. He's doing whatever possible. And if he's stuck and he gets frustrated because he is angry. He has decided he needs to be on the move. He is no longer accepting being still. I want us to adopt that mentality. We should no longer be accepting condescending, unbalanced, power and ego-based decisions in philanthropy. There is no need for them. We need to up-level our game, and we need to decide, actually, from now onwards, I am not going to accept not being able to share my views, not being able to stand up for my knowledge, for my mission, and explain it respectfully and collaboratively, and open a dialogue. So that's the mindset of the baby, never giving up. And the wisdom of a gardener, because in an example that I read about earlier this week, plants, the gardener doesn't grow plants. Plants grow themselves. The gardener provides the opportunity, the sunlight, the seeds, the fertilization. Ultimately, the plant grows itself. That's the same with impact. The impact will unfold with the people when the people are given the right opportunities to make their decisions. We cannot micromanage and control it to the very end. We just need to enable the environment. So I've been listening and observing this problem for quite a few years now. And what I've seen is there's solutions. These solutions can be implemented. And I hope that today's given you a lot of food for thought and a lot of things that you can implement already from today in your work. Whether you're a funder, whether you're a nonprofit, whatever part of the puzzle you have. Because if any one of you goes away and changes their behavior because of today, then to me, that is success. Now, I have also worked with a lot of organizations to actually troubleshoot this with them. So this is the moment where I invite you, if you do want a little bit more clarity on the type where you are in your organization and how you can change your approaches and your work to move in this direction of better collaboration and also more ease with funding, with fundraising, with explaining missions and impact, then please reach out. I'm opening up my calendar for a few limited free discovery calls where I sit down with you and I have a conversation and we go through your work and we set out a plan. And if you want to work with me beyond that, there is an investment involved, but these calls, they're free. They're just me spending time with you. So if it's something that you want to do, reach out. And the type of things that we would go through and that I invite, whether you do it with me or whether you do it by yourself, to think about are, how do you see your role? How do you define your role? What are your mechanics of impact? And are you setting the right goals? What's your relationship with funders? What do you want that to be? And up-leveling that, what code of conduct will you actually accept? I interviewed Anil Gupta just a few days ago actually, and he told me of an example where he just said no to a funder mid-program. He said, no, I'm sorry, I don't think you're interested enough in learning. I don't think our interests are aligned. That can be done. Just like a funder can say no, a nonprofit can say no. Both sides need to be in. So what is your relationship? And what are the practicalities of embedding all this in your fundraising? I've had a lot of people come to me talking about, I don't know how to fit this all in. Nobody's listening to me. I can't get that foot in the door. I can't get that conversation open. There are ways to make that happen. There are ways to go from having no conversations with funders and only doing grants to having many conversations. And for a funder, likewise, if you want to look at how you can improve your way of communicating with nonprofits, well, firstly, you can ask everybody who's on the call today. I'll circulate an email. If you want their opinion, I'm sure There's so many nonprofits out there that are willing to share with you their experience. But if you don't want to get it from them, then please let me be the spokesperson. Let me share. So whatever it is, feel free. Join me in making this change, whether you make it by yourself or with me on a call. I'll be sending you a link for that. And thank you for your time today and patience.